One of the most stereotypical moves when you see a guy in the gym trying to address his love handles or train his obliques is something called the side bend. It is also one of the most pointless activities that you can do in the gym, especially once you wind up grabbing plates on both sides and tipping back and forth. I have no idea what's even going on there.
Yeah, when you walk in a commercial gym, there's a lot of wild things. And this is one of those exercises that you always question yourself, why are they doing that? It's just one of those movements that you look at or you do, and it just doesn't feel that great for your spine.
Exactly, and I can't figure out, like you said, why people even do it, but there are lots of reasons not to do it, so let's hit those now.
Our first reason why is because it opens a window for poor spinal load, or positioning that is, right? Our weight is off to the side of us and we're looking to move in that frontal plane, a small tip pulling back. What normally happens though is that weight shifts forward and now we come out of that alignment and our shoulders roll forward. Now we're loading that lower back and our spine in a way that probably just doesn't feel great. When I look at people doing it in the gym, that's what I'm seeing.
Exactly. A lot of people too, I think of this as an abdominal exercise where they can load up a ton of weight. And so what happens once we wind up pulling forward, our lower back is not in that traditional deadlift position where we're nice and strong, where we're everything really nice and tight, but we're out of that position. So it's hard to find that stability. So you're inviting a lot of chance for injury, and that's not something that's really worth it. The other issue I see with the side bend very often is it ceases to be an abdominal motion and it winds up being a lot of hip motion. In theory, as you're doing the side plank, we're training something called anti-lateral flexion. Basically, we're fighting this side motion and driving up. And if we do that with our abs, we probably get something out of it. But very often we start to get our hips involved in it and then we're not really training our abs. And again, that same thing on point one happens where we start to really invite some issues to the spine.
So that brings us to our third point. Even if the side bend is done correctly, you're still left with a small range of motion, which the time under tension isn't quite as effective as some other exercises you can implement here.
Exactly, and when you think about it, it's because the side bend requires a lot more body awareness than you may initially expect when we're starting to really work in that frontal plane and really focus off of our hips and keep the focus on our abs. But when you're dealing with that super small range of motion with minimal time under tension, it also becomes hard to develop the mind-muscle connection that's really gonna help us feel our abs and feel our obliques. That's why it's just not worth it, especially because there are so many other more functional, more focused ab exercises that you're gonna feel like these three options.
The first alternative to the side bend would be the Palloff press. Now we're focusing on anti-rotation in this movement by extending our levers and focusing our hands in front of our chest and not rotating side to side. But we're gonna find that targeted muscle group a lot easier than pulling side to side looking for our obliques.
Exactly, and I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, well, the Palloff press is training something slightly different from what we're training in the side bend, but a lot of guys are going to the gym trying to attack their obliques with the side bend. Well, this is a more functional way to attack it, and when you're out in that hold, you get to really focus on the muscle group. You're gonna feel it fire, so it's a really focused way to start to train your obliques. If we want something that feels a little more similar to the side bend, let's look at the top position of a side bend because that's where we're doing the most work. When you have that weight down to one side and you have to hold your torso up in the hips and shoulders square position, that's where we're getting the most work out of side bend. So let's take that and evolve that for our second option, which is the single arm farmer's carry. Now we're living in the hardest point on the side bend, which is when we're in that top position and our abs have to be fully flexed, except we're moving, we're adding a quality of movement to that too. All the micro correction that has to happen as you're working through that single arm farmer's carry is really gonna develop your abs. You're gonna get a good cardio workout out of that too.
Also, your function of life, your way of life is just gonna be more transferable through an exercise like this, right? We're preparing ourselves for carrying the groceries, walking upstairs, being able to load one side of the body versus the other. So it just makes more sense. That leads us to our third exercise, which now incorporates the hips and some overhead, a lot of body awareness, a little bit more of a technical movement called the overhead windmill, where we're gonna focus now on bringing the load overhead. We're hinging at the hip, but that hinge is now gonna offset or load those obliques or the areas we think we're targeting in that side bend.
If you're doing side bends and you're shifting at the hips, you're moving without intent through your hips when you're doing the side bend anyway. Now let's move in a more focused fashion. Let's learn how to work the hinge, which is the best way to really activate your hips. You're thinking about that and we're getting some twisting action. You wind up with an abdominal exercise that's working you in all three planes of motion. That's how our body winds up moving in real life, so that's a much better alternative.
So try these three exercises. They're definitely a better bang for your buck than the side bend. And if you're someone out there doing the double weighted side bend or whatever you want to call that, please let us know again reasons why, and does it work for you?
It doesn't. Stick to our moves.